America's gun rights debate has entered a new era, driven by recent Supreme Court decisions that are sending shockwaves through the legal and political landscape. These landmark rulings are not just minor adjustments, they are rewriting decades of firearms law, challenging long-held assumptions about the balance between individual rights and public safety. As a result, the rules about who can carry guns, where they can carry them, and under what circumstances are all being reconsidered. This has created a climate of uncertainty for both gun owners and advocates of stricter controls, as communities across the country grapple with what these changes mean for their daily lives. The Supreme Court's new approach centers on whether modern gun laws align with the nation's historical traditions, not just public safety. This historical test marks a significant departure from previous legal standards, making it harder for states to justify restrictions. This shift has triggered a wave of legal battles nationwide, with states like California and New York seeing long-standing laws overturned or challenged in courtrooms. The outcomes of these cases will determine the rules for carrying firearms in public spaces, from city parks to crowded downtowns, and force states to rethink their approach to public safety and regulation. Gun rights supporters see these changes as a long-overdue affirmation of constitutional rights, a victory for the Second Amendment. Meanwhile, opponents worry about the impact on communities, fearing an increase in gun violence and a loss of local control. The legal ground is shifting beneath everyone's feet, and the full consequences of these decisions are only beginning to emerge as new cases are filed and old laws are re-examined. With more gun cases on the Supreme Court's docket, the debate is far from over. Each new decision could set a precedent that shapes American life for generations. For Americans, understanding this evolving legal landscape is crucial. It affects state laws, community safety, and the very meaning of the Second Amendment in modern society. The nation is watching closely as the courts write this new chapter, one that will define the future of gun rights and regulation in America. California's strict gun laws included a ban on openly carrying handguns in most public places, especially in counties with over 200,000 residents. This covered about 95% of Californians, making open carry rare in cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco. Lawmakers argued the ban reduced fear and violence in crowded areas, requiring concealed carry permits instead. In rural counties, local authorities could issue open carry licenses, creating a patchwork of rules across the state. Gun rights advocates challenged this, arguing that constitutional rights shouldn't depend on where you live. Mark Baird and others sued, claiming the law left most citizens with no practical way to carry a firearm for self-defense. Their case moved through the courts, setting the stage for a major decision influenced by a new Supreme Court precedent. The legal battle would soon reshape California's approach to gun regulation. On January 2, 2026, the Ninth Circuit Court issued a groundbreaking decision, striking down California's open carry ban for most residents and declaring it unconstitutional. This ruling sent shockwaves through the legal and political landscape, as California's law had long been considered one of the strictest in the nation. Judge Lawrence Van Dyke, writing for the majority, argued that openly carrying firearms was not only common at the nation's founding, but also deeply rooted in American history. He emphasized that there's no historical tradition of banning open carry, and that such restrictions are inconsistent with the original understanding of the Constitution. The court concluded that California's law violated the core protections of the Second Amendment, which guarantees the right to keep and bear arms for self-defense and other lawful purposes. This decision came in response to new Supreme Court instructions, which now require judges to focus on the nation's historical traditions when evaluating gun laws, rather than relying primarily on arguments about public safety or modern policy concerns. The ruling was celebrated as a major victory for gun rights advocates who have long argued that restrictive laws infringe on constitutional freedoms. It also set a powerful precedent for other states within the Ninth Circuit's jurisdiction, potentially impacting millions of residents. However, the dissenting judge strongly disagreed, arguing that states should still have the authority to regulate how guns are carried in public, such as by requiring permits for concealed carry or imposing other reasonable restrictions. The split decision highlights the deep divisions among judges and underscores the unsettled and contentious nature of gun law in America today. The Ninth Circuit's ruling marks a pivotal moment in the ongoing debate, but the legal battle is far from over. Many expect the case to be appealed, with the Supreme Court likely to have the final say. California's comprehensive gun control framework, now faces its biggest challenge yet, as lawmakers and advocates on both sides prepare for the next phase of the fight. The outcome of this case could reshape gun laws across the West, influencing not just California, but every state within the Ninth Circuit's reach. The Ninth Circuit's decision was shaped by the Supreme Court's 2022 Bruen ruling, which changed how courts review gun laws. Before Bruen, courts balanced gun rights with public safety, upholding many regulations. Bruen replaced that with a single test. Gun laws must match the nation's historical tradition from the late 1700s. If there's no historical precedent, the law is likely unconstitutional. This forces courts and lawmakers to become historians, searching for old laws to justify modern regulations. The focus is no longer on effectiveness or safety, but on historical parallels. The California case shows how this new test makes it harder for states to defend gun laws created for today's challenges. The Bruen Standard is now the main tool for challenging gun regulations nationwide. The Ninth Circuit's split decision reveals the deep and persistent divide over the meaning and reach of the Second Amendment in America. This case is just the latest in a long line of legal battles that have shaped the national conversation about gun rights and public safety. The majority, led by Judge Van Dyke, views the right to carry firearms in public as a core constitutional protection, one that should only be limited by restrictions that existed at the time the Second Amendment was adopted in the 18th century. They believe that the historical context is crucial to understanding the scope of this right. According to this view, bans on open carry, when combined with strict concealed carry rules, leave law-abiding citizens with no practical way to exercise their right to self-defense outside the home. Supporters argue that such restrictions undermine the very purpose of the Second Amendment. For the majority, the government's authority to regulate firearms is tightly bound by historical precedent, and any modern law must be justified by practices that would have been accepted centuries ago. On the other hand, the dissent, written by Judge Randy Smith, argues that states should have the power to decide how guns are carried as long as citizens have some legal method, such as concealed carry, available to them. He emphasizes the importance of state flexibility in addressing local needs. Judge Smith believes the Supreme Court's Bruen decision still leaves room for reasonable regulations that help maintain public order and protect communities, even as it affirms the right to bear arms. This side sees the Second Amendment as a vital part of American liberty, but not an absolute right. They argue that some limits are necessary to balance individual freedoms with the collective need for safety. The ongoing debate centers on how much flexibility states should have to address modern safety concerns, such as rising gun violence and changing social conditions, while still respecting constitutional rights. The split among the judges highlights a critical legal question: how far can states go in regulating guns under the new standards set by the Supreme Court? The answer is far from settled and continues to spark passionate debate. Ultimately, the outcome of this debate will shape gun laws and the balance between rights and regulation for years to come, affecting millions of Americans across the country. California officials quickly pushed back against the Ninth Circuit's ruling, vowing to defend their gun laws. Attorney General Rob Bonta signaled the state would seek further review or appeal to the Supreme Court. California and other states argue that the history and tradition test is unworkable and prevents them from addressing modern threats. They insist their laws are vital for public safety and will use every legal tool to keep them. The DOJ, meanwhile, is defending federal gun laws in cases like United States Ender O. Mani, arguing that some restrictions are consistent with historical tradition. The federal government claims the Bruen test still allows for disarming people deemed dangerous or irresponsible. The outcome of these cases will shape how far states and the federal government can go in regulating guns. The legal fight is intensifying on multiple fronts. The Supreme Court is set to decide more cases that will define the Second Amendment's reach. One key case, United States versus Himani, challenges a federal law banning gun ownership by illegal drug users. Lower courts have ruled the law unconstitutional, saying there's no historical tradition for such a ban. The DOJ argues that history supports disarming those deemed dangerous. The Supreme Court's decision will clarify whether entire categories of people can be barred from owning guns. Other cases will address where guns can be banned, such as schools and government buildings. Conflicting lower court rulings have created confusion, making Supreme Court guidance essential. The justices must decide how closely modern laws must match historical ones, and whether states can address today's safety concerns. These rulings will set the rules for gun regulation nationwide. The future of laws like California's open carry ban hangs in the balance. The Ninth Circuit's ruling is part of a national trend, giving gun rights groups new legal ammunition to challenge strict laws in other states. Laws banning certain firearms, limiting magazines, or imposing waiting periods could all face new challenges. The result may be a loosening of gun laws in states that once favored strict controls. For some, this restores constitutional rights. For others, it raises fears about public safety. Americans may soon see more people openly carrying guns in public spaces, changing the feel of daily life. The Supreme Court will ultimately decide how the Bruin test applies, especially for sensitive places and who can be barred from owning guns. Until then, legal uncertainty will persist. The stakes are high, and the nation is watching closely. Understanding these court battles is key to grasping the future of America's gun debate.